So we're talking microaggressions today on our live show, and one of the most common ones that has come up for you, Mike, is "What are you?" So before we dive right into that, why don't you introduce yourself, say hello, welcome, my darling
Hi,
man,
hello, welcome. I'm Michael Mitro. I'm Heidi's husband, and
and activist,
something, yeah,
father, partner,
yes, those things.
aspiring musician.
No, I'm about that.
Well,
Retired cello
car jamming,
player. There you
retired yet
go.
cello player. That's true.
Yeah. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so my friend, one of the things that's been coming forward in our conversations with each other and with um, new allies, right? So, like the people that I interact with on a daily basis within my coaching community and within just our friend group is like, hey, Heidi, can I say this? Or what if I do this? Or what is offensive? And there's a lot of conversation about that. And first and foremost, I think it's really important that we identify who we're talking to, like who you and I are trying to engage and reach. We're
Hmm.
not professing to be experts, and we are also recognizing that we're further along on the continuum than some of our friends and
Yes.
colleagues. And so, what we're trying to do is bridge this space to where people feel empowered and welcomed and safe, right? Like there's so much cortisol collectively right now. There's so much of a trigger in everybody's bodies
Yep.
that we're in freak out mode all the time. And what we're trying to do is drop those cortisol levels to create a safe space for people to have uncomfortable conversations, to stay engaged. Because let's
Yeah.
be honest, our attention span is pretty short when it
Yep.
comes to things. And so anyway, long-winded, but welcome and tell me all the things.
I'll tell you all the things. All right.
Really gorgeous
Um,
segue.
well, I mean, that is kind of it. Like, there's so much stuff. There's so many different layers, and um, kind of in the line, along the same lines of what you just said. There's so many layers to the conversation, and there are so many different stages that people are in, and so it's kind of hard to have like a, like a clearly defined objective when people are in different starting places. But I think to keep it in the vein of like, this is a constructive conversation, and the goal is for all of us to move along our continuum from wherever we are to whatever that next phase is. So I think I just wanted to make that, add that to what you had already said. So,
Well, and
and with
in
that
that
said,
vein, then it's our opportunity to have conversations where we are at and recognizing you and I are not having the same experience right now. Like
absolutely not, but we
it's
can still
for
have um we can still have a conversation, and we can still have our experiences, and
and I think, yeah.
it doesn't have to be confrontational. And I think that's where the opportunity lies, is demonstrating, or showing through our actions that um, we can we can have uncomfortable conversations, and we can feel however we're going to feel, and we can do it in a constructive and meaningful way. So
Yeah. And I think for you and I, what I shared with you this morning is like, I feel safe. Like my cortisol levels are still slightly elevated when we're talking about things where I don't feel smart, or I feel like I'm behind, or, you get your nervous system tripped, but I feel safe with you. And I think that is what we're trying to create, is an element of safety, not so people stand still,
mhm.
but an element of safety so you can actually grow.
Yep.
And you need that cortisol to drop in order to actually take in new information or look at things from a different perspective. Um,
Hmm.
and so maybe before we jump right in, it's just like a collective exhale of like, oh, we are, you're good, you're good.
Hmm.
Okay, friend, you have more experience with microaggression, obviously, than I do. So can you give me and our people that are watching, like, the definition of a microaggression, because what you said this morning was really eloquent and impactful.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What time was that?
I don't know, man.
Okay.
Over coffee.
Sure. All right. Well, I mean, I think the thing that triggered this conversation, and then we arrived at the decision that this what we were going to talk about last week was, the question of, so like, what are you, man? Like, that was a question that I heard a lot growing up, and at the time, I didn't really understand or make the connection to the idea that it's not that's not a question that you should really be asking people, because it indicates that you are something other than. And so
Who asked you this question, by the way?
I
Was it
remember kids in school.
predominantly white, or was this across the board color wise?
This was kind of across the board, because I was lighter than most kids that I went to elementary school with.
What does
Not
that
all of them,
sound? Is
What's
Ivy
that?
singing?
No, she's doing
Anyway.
her thing. Is it loud?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It just sounds like
Elena,
somebody screaming.
Elena, be quiet. Okay, hold on a second.
Okay. Hilarious. So this is what happens when you have two people who are raising a family and having like really complex questions and conversations around microaggressions. But you also have a really musical 7-year-old who loves to perform and loves to sing. And when we are finished with our show, we fully anticipate to watch hers. So thank you for indulging the pause. Are you ready, babe?
Okay.
Okay.
Hi,
welcome back.
I'm back.
So what are you was a question that you heard not just from white people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now that I've had time, maturity, and perspective, the question it is veiled in like that distinction that you are, like I said, something other than, and in this case, other than what the perception or the perceived common culture is. The assumption was that I was, my biracial child. I had a white mom and a black dad, or a black dad or black mom and a white dad, or whatever the combination is, and
which is
that's not
accurate.
the case, right? But because my skin is lighter than some other people's, or because I'm darker than other, then I'm in this middle ground, this limbo, this racial limbo. But not knowing that that's not actually the case. But it speaks to the complexity of the conversation and the issue.
Right.
So
and the complexity, the way I see it too, is like if a white person is asking this of you, there's an assumption that you should respond like, well, what are you? Mm-hmm. And it's a seemingly innocent question. Mm-hmm. And if another person of color or another black person is asking you, like, I know you've been on the receiving end of colorism as well. Like you're not dark enough. You're not light enough. I think racial limbo, that's an interesting book title, by the way. I think there could be something really beautiful that comes from that. But for the purposes of the next little bit, can you explain what it feels like? Because most of the people watching this are going to be white, I imagine, just by the nature of who is coming in. When a white person has a curiosity about a black person's origin, what does that actually mean from a microaggression place? Because it's coming from a place of unexamined curiosity. But
it means you're not from here, right? I think that's my experience. That's my impression. Like it means that you're not from here, or you stand out. You're different than everybody else. And my response now is like, and actually it hasn't happened in a long time, but my response even this morning when we were talking about it was, I am a human being. That's what I am, and to suggest otherwise, because of the way that someone looks is, that does all of humanity a disservice. And so it's imperative that is the response then, like, what do you mean? What are you? Like, what do you mean? What am I?
I also find that question like dehumanizing.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
what are you is like, and so the way that this was my own white person's journey. Like, what are you maybe was the first question. And then I would try to figure out, like, how can I ask what I really want to know? And what I really want to know on an unconscious level is, I live in the whitest part of America. How the hell did you get here? Like, that was how, that was the next layer of the question, but I still felt really entitled to ask it. I still felt like if I met anybody who didn't look like me, I felt like I could ask that question, and it was showing interest and not showing my unconscious racism.
Right. And that's an interesting thing that, like, if your perception is that it isn't racist, does it make it so? Like, I'm going to use the example of the national conversation that's happening right now, where the commander in chief is using phrases like kung flu and some of these others, and then when pressed about it by an Asian journalist, he comes back and says, well, it's not racist. Well, how do you determine, why do you get to determine whether that question is racist or not? If it is offensive to that person, then, like, yeah, it's racist. Like,
so what do you say to people who are like, we just have to have tougher skin? Being politically correct is like the downfall of our culture. Like, we just need to toughen up.
I think that is a veiled, it's an easy way out to not have to actually take responsibility for what you're saying. Tougher skin implies that you can't take the pressure, you can't take the assault. But that's what it is. It's within the context of microaggressions, there are other categories, and micro assault, micro insult, micro invalidation. Those are all kind of within the category of microaggression. And micro invalidation, I believe, is what that terminology or that phrasing, like, we should just have tougher skin or you're too sensitive, that is an invalidation of someone's feelings, and that's not okay. That's how we can continue the cycle.
I also think, like, with the people that I'm talking to, and it's predominantly white women leaders, that's who is showing up in my circle, that's who's asking me a ton of questions. But there is this fear of, like, I don't know, what do I say then at all? Like, if someone has a curiosity about you, and I have my own answer to this, but I'm curious, like, if someone has a curiosity, what would an appropriate way to engage you be, or don't they?
I think it's all about context. And I've referred to this a couple of different times with different people when they've posed the same question, where it's like, how do I do this in a way that doesn't come off as like elitist, that, very description of white privilege, whatever the thing is. I think it is really contextual.
Okay.
And if you are, and this is for me, this is not a blanket statement for everyone. I want to make sure that that's abundantly clear.
You haven't been sent as the
I am
spokesperson
not
for Black people.
For them, yeah, and so from my perspective, like, if you are coming to the conference, I mean, like, if you're coming to me with a genuine curiosity and with the idea of advancement of your own knowledge for the purposes of becoming a better person,
what should they ask?
I think it depends on what they want to know. Like,
most people have no idea what they're actually asking, honey. Like, that's how, like, convoluted it is.
Well, that's where that needs to be the first step. Like, figure out what you want to know. Like, do some self-reflection.
Why are you asking?
Yeah, why are you asking? And why does it matter? And again, it's all contextual. It really depends on what the question is. Yeah,
Can I give you an example that, so
yeah,
like
please do.
we have a friend of ours who has adopted children from another country. And in talking with her, I asked her if her children were biological siblings. And it was a really offensive question to her. And because it was like, of course they're siblings. And there was a lot of, I could feel how upset she was. Where I was coming from was my experience with your family, where some of your siblings are, related to one another and some of you are not. And it was a question from a different context. And when she realized where I was coming from, it wasn't an offensive question. But she and I also had an interpersonal neighborly relationship. Like this was about us having a deeper understanding of each other because we were friends.
Yep.
And I also think that it is okay for white people to just stay curious about something and not actually have to know the answer. And that's tough for our culture in general, where you can ask Alexa anything and get an answer right now. It's challenging to hold your curiosity and go, I actually don't need to know.
Or get shamed.
I got shamed by Alexa friends. Yeah. I may or may not have told Alexa under my breath. I wasn't even talking to her, but my dad, I was home. This was a year ago or so. But I was singing a song while I was washing dishes, and he's like, what is that? And then he said, Alexa, play whatever. And then he had to subscribe to all this stuff. And I was like, oh, suck it, Alexa. And she was like, that's not very kind. And I was like, what? And then my dad apologized to the robot. And I was like,
to Alexa.
I felt like I needed to go to Sacred Heart and go to confession because I insulted Alexa. So suck it, Alexa. Wherever you are, I hope you heard it. Anyhow, we live in a culture where you can get information like this and you feel entitled to know the answer. Someone's color or origin is not an Alexa question.
And I also think that the distinction that you made about your interpersonal relationship with the neighbor plays into it as well. Like, if you're walking down the street and you see someone, a black person that you don't know, and you just feel like you need to know the answer to that question, and you just walk up and ask them, what are you or where are you from? That's not appropriate, obviously. But I think it's
I don't know that that's obvious.
I was just saying, I think it's worth saying out loud. From my perspective, it's obvious, but not, that's where everyone's location on the continuum comes into play. And so again, so then you just sit on that and you wait for another opportunity, I don't know, or you strike up a conversation and you start by learning about the person, not necessarily about, their genetic makeup or where they're from. And these are just examples. There are more, but this is, I think this is for me, and one that I have experience with. So it made sense to speak to this one specifically. But yeah, I think it's contextual, it's relational, and like, if you don't have a black friend, then then I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Get one. I don't know. Like, find out how you can satisfy your curiosity in a productive, constructive, meaningful way, and be aware of how you are proceeding in that endeavor. Like, don't just do it to satisfy your curiosity.
And that curiosity comes with a sense of entitlement and privilege. Like, when I was in college, I had a buddy who lived in our dorm. He looked like Jimi Hendrix, right? Like your shirt right now. He had hair, he had this beautiful hair. And I felt entitled to be like, dude, can I touch your hair? Thinking it was just not, I wasn't being offensive. Are you consciously muted?
Yes.
Okay. That it was I was entitled to that. And he was like, trigger, language warning. He's like, fuck you, Heidi. He was so offended. And then he left, and I just had to sit with that. And it was it was never my intention to be offensive. It was never my intention to be disrespectful, but it was so much so. And I remember feeling ashamed. I remember feeling like, again, I needed to go to confession. But I felt like as a white person at a predominantly white university that what I was actually saying was, I've never met anybody. I mean, I knew you at the time, but you didn't have hair. I mean, that was like, we can talk about if that was microaggressive against your hair. It wasn't meant to be. But also this idea that I was just entitled to be able to ask that.
Mm-hmm.
And then to be
Yep.
like, I felt like he slapped me across the face by saying no.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Yeah.
didn't have enough of a personal relationship, nor do I think that's probably ever appropriate. Maybe it is, I don't know. But I didn't have enough street cred with him. I didn't have enough of an interpersonal relationship. And
Yep.
what we later circled back to was, you are a small town white girl with no fucking experience. That was really what it boiled down to. And
Mm-hmm.
my discomfort was for me to own.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I mean, this is part and parcel to like the conversations that we've had previously, where it's like, if you're not, if you haven't had the experience or the exposure, and then you leave the nest with your ideas, opinions, and perceptions of other people, cultures, and then those are the kind of experiences that you run into, right? Like, and I'm not, I don't know what the answer is. I know there is an answer of some sort, but
Around what question?
around like exposure to, people who don't look like you, or cultural exposure, or historical perspective, that can inform like the questions that are asked when you do encounter that.
One of the
That
things
makes
that I
sense.
did after this interaction was I actually started working at the Multicultural Student Center at La Crosse. I was like, I'm the whitest chick I know. And I don't have a whole lot of, who's making lunch?
Ivy.
Okay. I didn't have a whole lot of experience with anybody. I mean, I had met you, but I was like, to have a relationship with someone who wasn't white. And so I started tutoring several different people within the Multicultural Center. And it was such an education. As much as I was teaching history in Mesopotamia, we were having interpersonal relationships, and for them to ask me where I was from, and for me to ask them where they were from, and to swap recipes and talk about, the Vietnam War from a different space. I continually felt like I got demoted in the best way, where I was up on this white pedestal, unknowns to myself in some ways. And it shifted things a lot for me to have conscious experiences with people outside of my circle. And I'm still connected to these people now. That's 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was in the context of a mutual curiosity based
Yes.
on proximity and time together, and like, so it was a connection that was fostered and developed.
Right.
That's how interpersonal relationships work.
Right. And then eventually that becomes just your foundation of understanding each other as humans.
Mhm.
Like, one of the gals that I tutored was from Vietnam or Laos, excuse me. And their culture when she was growing up wasn't around birthdays. Like, she didn't understand why you would celebrate a child's birthday. Like, that didn't make any sense to her. And we ended up having a conversation around like birthdays, and she didn't know when hers was. She just knew she was born around the harvest time. And now she's raising these children in America where like you rent a circus for your kid, and she didn't. That so yeah, it was so far from her experience. And by the way, she smuggled in the best meal I have ever had into the Murphy Library at La Crosse. Like, she decided her birthday was in November, and so was mine. So we had a mutual birthday party in one of like the back study rooms. It was the best food. We smelled up the entire part of this library. Like how we didn't get kicked out for having food, I don't know, because it smelled like the best restaurant ever. But she wanted me to feel celebrated, and I wanted her, like, I brought cake. Like it was it was a celebration of culture from a place of like, I love her. It was and what she was going through on campus was ridiculous. The trials that she heard, the racial slurs that she and her husband went through as they're getting their freaking undergraduate in English. Like I remember just sitting with her. Yes, it was about history, but it was about like, these people think that I'm stupid, and I'm in college in a different country, and they ran a restaurant. And anyway, I'm getting off track. But the microaggressions that they went through was this experience of like, you actually don't belong here. That's a loud lunch, man. I hope it's delicious what she's making. It's so great. It's okay. It's all right.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, I mean, and I feel like I am very fortunate in the fact that, you know, I have a cultural frame of reference about, you know, where I am. And I can't imagine what it must have been like. And I know, you know, I know other people who have had that similar experience, having had to flee as an, you know, a toddler from Laos, not knowing where their parents were taking them, not knowing if they were going to make it. You know, people behind them didn't make it, and then being brought to the United States as a, you know, this is their fault, basically, is what it comes down to. Like, the United States didn't hold up their end of the deal and didn't keep promises, and so they get here and they're kind of just left to their own devices. And then on top of that, they have all of this, you know, misunderstood racial, you know, tension towards them because they don't look like everyone else, and they live differently. You know, they live in the big family units, and they, you know, they haven't adopted the Western ideal of like fleet, you know, empty nesters and that kind of, and so it's there's so many, again, it's so nuanced and so multi-layered.
And I think that it's different generationally, right? Like I tutored some kids who were elementary school kids who were not allowed to speak English at home, and they were not allowed to speak their native language at school. And this, where do I fit in? This racial limbo, sweetie, has legs. There's something around this. Like, I don't know if you're going to get your master's or whatever, but like this would be a dissertation. Like, I can't get off of that right now, but creating a space. And I think the limbo is where we are all feeling collectively as well. Like, what do we do now? And so if we are going to help guide people who are looking to be an ally, who are looking to like, how do I lead right now? How do I dismantle my own privilege, my own entitlement to like being centered around? Like, what do we say? What do we do now? What now?
I think it comes back to seeking out sources of information that are outside of, and this has kind of been also the conversation over the last month, but seeking out sources of information that not necessarily run contrary, but are enhancing the what you already know. And I think if you're at the point where you're asking how you can participate, what you can do, how you can make a difference, you're already, you know, moving in the right direction on the continuum, you know, and progressing. And so, but I think,
and in this case, I think you could ask Alexa. Like, Alexa, what are the books on microaggression right now?
I can provide links to several different podcasts. If you're not a reader, I'm not a huge, you know, I do read, but I find that it's more, I retain it more if it's something that I hear. And so,
would you be willing to put those links on this page? Because I think
Absolutely.
what's happening for a lot of leaders too is like they're being told, don't ask Black leaders right now what you should be doing. You're late to the party. And they're like, who do I ask? And I do, for right now, it is really appropriate. If you have questions to ask us, ask Mike. Like I'm offering that, I think that's safe, right? For
Hmm.
us to do a little bit of emotional labor for people, knowing
My
that,
my yeah.
go ahead.
My intention is to be, as accessible and transparent and open and honest as I can. Um,
Why?
and
Why is that important to you just as an individual? Because I think that's running counter to a lot of what people are hearing from other Black leaders.
sure. Well, I mean, I think for one thing,
Can you move your mic just a little bit, sweetie? It's coming through really loud.
okay,
Sorry.
is that better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think for one thing, I'm being led. Like we've talked about this. Like I'm being led. The path
By
is
what?
kind of being by my passion, by my desire to have. I feel a responsibility on some level to participate in this conversation in like a deeper, more meaningful way. Um, I think I have a perspective in the community that we are in. Um, I have, I think, a perspective and an experience that is different than most of the other people who live here,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like I have the experience with change implementation. Starting out as a personal trainer, but then moving into coaching, and then it just continues. Like it's applicable across the board. Actually,
Implementing change, you
changes
mean?
changes what I do. I don't,
Mm.
like this level of change is significant and big, and so, but I feel like there are tools that people use when they are embarking on change, physically and emotionally around fitness and health that could help them navigate something like this as well. And I I just feel compelled to participate differently.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you and I as a duo, like, again, just an invitation to those of you watching or catching this on the replay, like, let's take a collective breath.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been a crisis vibration and a sprint for the last month.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a marathon, and it's a marathon that will more than likely happen and continue after our deaths. Like
Mm-hmm.
this now becomes the way that I'm shifting it to a more sustainable space for myself is this is my contribution to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But conversation doesn't mean you talk all the time. Conversation means you listen as well. And having the sustainability and the long game matters. And I think
Yep.
you and I are still defining what the long game looks like. How does our family dynamic still stay primary in the midst of this radical, it's not even radical, but I do kind of feel like a bomb has gone off. There has been a disruption, appropriately so.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you prioritize? And I think that is where you and I, and people have been reaching out, like, where do we begin? Where do we start? And that's where you and I come in with values.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if one of your values is community, and that's going to be different for everyone, but for me, one of my values is community. And as part of that, like paying attention to what's happening in the political arena, and especially around the redistricting and and during the election and those kinds of conversations that seem to be kind of subtly happening in the background, because unless you're actively participating in the conversation or actively seeking out information from it happens without you really even knowing it. But that's one
It's
of
a
those
form of
things.
microaggression. It's not even
Absolutely.
micro,
It's
that's macro.
disenfranchisement
Yeah,
is what
right.
it is.
Right.
And so it's happening in a lot of places. And so, yeah, like participation on a more on a macro scale, like in the collective. So yes, it's important to have the development of self and self-awareness, and just discovering what your individual and collective values are. But it's also then important to like participate in the dialogue on a macro scale also. And that can be a lot. And so you obviously have to like pace yourself and have a plan so that it is sustainable, because I think what happens then is people, they participate in that sprint, and then a month and a half, 2 months into it, they can't maintain that pace anymore.
Or you're overwhelmed with where you are feeling. For me and for other women leaders that I'm working with, it's like, I am now aware of all of the work that I have to do, and I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So I can't do anything. And that in of itself is white privilege. Like, I'm just not going to participate. And staying engaged now becomes a choice. And I think that is the shift that we're at. Because even if you watch the news, like, things are starting to shift back to COVID, it's election, like all of these things, but we're not, the news cycle is already starting to shift. And you and I are in this for the long haul, but that's where we are compelled. Not everybody has to do what we're doing. And it requires that you still know where you're at on the continuum and continue to move.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I think this conversation this morning, if you stay where you are on the continuum, and I think for a long time people were under the impression that, okay, once I achieve X, good, I can just continue to move in this, and this, and I don't have to do this.
Well, it's like hitting your goal weight, and then you go binge.
And then now, so what happens then though is that you get to that point on the continuum, and everything else continues to move. Time continues to move. Culture continues to move. And then you're here, and then all of a sudden it's passed you by, and something like this happens, and there are instances where people push back because they're comfortable, and they're like, I've done it. I've arrived already. So why is this happening now? But in actuality, you have to continue to move. There's only, just like in fitness, there's only one finish line. Like you reach your goal weight, and then you have to figure out what the next thing is so that you can continue, to move. So, and
there's an element of rest. Like, you don't just work out every day. You don't, I mean, you can do something every day, but resting and recuperating. And that is why the long game strategy matters. Like, if we're starting with microaggression, let's say that you are recognizing yourself as a person who asks from an unexamined place, you ask Black people, what are you? Or where are you from? Or no, where are you originally from? Like, no, where are your ancestors from? Like, you just keep asking the same version of a microaggressive question. If that's where you're starting, where you are on the continuum, your new next level is to shut up. Your new next level is to go, I don't actually have to ask those questions unless it's in an interpersonal relationship. That is another element of like being an activist on some level.
The expectation of an answer to your question that is in and of it, I think you've seen plenty of examples of that on, social media, where people have captured the image, the video of the couple or the woman or the man, confronting someone who doesn't look like them, who's doing something that they're not comfortable with, and they feel the right to demand an answer.
Right.
When in actuality, that is not their right. Like, you don't, like, no, I think that is one of the most interesting phenomenon that I've seen, that's taking place right now, is this doubling down on, and it's happened, within the last week even.
Right.
And it's interesting to me that despite the coverage and despite the conversations that are happening around them, they are still here on the continuum.
And I think that's where that's, so if I can give any advice to people who are wrestling with their own microaggression tendencies, and they didn't even have that language, you know, a month ago, whenever you are triggered by something in the news, or you are triggered by something that Mike and I are talking about, the very first place to do any work is to take that in and go, why does this upset me? Why does this frustrate me? Why am I having such a visceral experience here? And the very first thing you need to do is calm your nervous system down.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the spaciousness. So spaciousness is a core value of mine. Then you have the spaciousness to examine it. I don't know how many times you and I have had the conversation where Mike's like, you're being really hard on yourself right now. Like, give yourself some credit for, like, are you racist? Yeah, probably. Are you actively like recruiting for the Klan? No. I mean, like, we need to be where we are, do our own interpersonal healing. And that's the reason my coaching business is called The New Next Level. Go to the new next level. If your level was asking people, what are you? The new next level is to be quiet. If the level you're at is you see something on the news and you're like, why is that wrong? The new next level is to find out why that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There's something, I want to be a little mindful of time because I want people to be able to digest what we're saying. But I'd love it if we could like bookend this with what you taught me when you were working at Deep Sea. So I was brought up with the golden rule of treat others the way you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if you can do a little lesson based on your time at Deep Sea about the platinum rule to kind of bring it home.
Yeah, it's really simple, and it is treat others the way they want to be treated. Like,
The way they want to be treated.
yes, yep. And because if you treat others the way you want to be treated, and I mean, I think we're seeing the consequences of that played out again and again. Like, or like I the way that Heidi wants to be treated and the way that I want to be treated are different, and I think it requires that you take a step back and like it, if you're getting when you get to know someone, like then you have an opportunity to treat them respectfully, and like I don't know, like the way Heidi would want to be treated based on her upbringing and the way that I would want to be treated based on my upbringing might be different. I'm not saying that they are, but I think that they might be. And so if you go into something with the assumption that everyone has had the same experience that you have, and you treat, uh, I think that's a missed opportunity.
I think an example of that is like if someone wants to show interest in me, they ask me a ton of questions and I will happily talk about myself all day long.
Mm-hmm.
If someone actually wants to get to know you, they're probably going to have to like stand near you for 2 or 3 times, right? And then you'll feel them out and you'll give them an in.
Mm-hmm.
But if you come at Mike with like 100 questions, first of all, there's going to be like why are you like, there will be a little bit of a pushback. So let me give you an example for Mike. Mike and I go on a walk almost every single day. Here's what I'm learning. If I pounce on Mike within the first 10 minutes of our walk about all the shit that's going on in my head, the walk becomes a nightmare from hell for both of us. I have to consciously, and I don't always do this, Mike, and I know you know this, I consciously have to wait for you to start the conversation. Because how I want to be treated is let's go. Let's get this shit done. I got an agenda. Let's do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what you want to do is connect with me in a way that is like sustainable and human, that's not always with an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've noticed our last couple of walks that I'm not talking at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to implement the platinum rule of like, how does he actually want to walk with me?
Yeah, I mean, and I think the other the other thing is like the love language thing. I mean, that can be
Totally.
something like that is applicable here also. Like, what are your I mean, it's not the same thing, but what are the love languages? Is like each of you has your your top 2, the top 3
Mm-hmm.
items on that list of how you connect, and they're not the same for each of you. But once you know the other person's connection hierarchy, then you can approach your relationship that way, and it's a lot more enjoyable, right? Like,
and we
I
do
think
eventually get to my way of connecting.
Mm-hmm.
like when we get into the walk, we end up having that conversation, right?
Hmm.
But it's a dance. It's an awareness that you're not the only one in the transaction, that you're not the
Yep.
only one in the relationship. And I think that's what's happening for a lot of white people is they're like, oh shit, we're not the only people on the planet. Oh no,
Hmm.
all of the systems are set up to support my whiteness in the world, and we're not the only ones at the party.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's the truth, Ruth.
It's the truth, man. Okay, so takeaways from today. White people are not the only people at the party. And even when you recognize that there are Black people at the party, the first question that you ask them is, hi, what's your name?
Hmm.
Not what are you? Having interpersonal relationships with people who don't look like you, especially within the context, if you are watching this in the Midwest, you're going to have to do it on purpose. You're going to have to seek it out, and not to like check a box that you are culturally aware, but it actually enriches your life to have experiences that are not just your own or within
Hmm.
a 10-mile radius of where you live. And whatever you're triggered by in the news or whatever you're triggered by in terms of language, the very first tough conversation to have is between you and yourself, and
Hmm.
take that to the new next level. And
Yep.
we will happily and welcome you in, even if you're like, oh my God, if I say that, I'm a total racist. Please, like that's how we go to the new next level
You have
is
to
with that
learn by
awareness.
doing, just like anything else.
And we are committed to being that safe place. If you are here to be disrespectful and be, a jerk, please don't. If
Confrontational.
right, if you are like, Heidi, I feel like a total, like the private messages that I get are, I have never said this to another person, and we're really okay being in that role right now. That is how we bring people into the conversation. There's enough shame going on everywhere else. This is a space where you're safe, and you're going to
Yep.
feel uncomfortable. Both of those can happen at the same time.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts, sweetie? Can we
No,
see your
I think
tattoo? I see him peeking out. Can we see Faraz? Have you introduced the people to Faraz?
no.
Hi,
I haven't.
buddy.
Hi, Heidi. Oh, he
That
says hi.
wasn't microaggressive, was it?
No. No,
Hi,
it
bud.
wasn't.
That's Faraz, means fierce in Portuguese.
Yep.
Hi, buddy. Anyway, final thoughts, honey?
Um, I forgot what I was going to say now.
Sorry, I got distracted by his beauty.
It was something, but I did have a final thought. Um,
Let me ask it again. Maybe it'll jog. Hey, babe, we're going to wrap. Any final thoughts?
no, it's gone, man.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It'll come back to me, and then
Any
I'll
new final thoughts?
just that it does require active participation,
What requires active participation?
like progress, like self-development, self-improvement, self-awareness, all of those. Like it requires active participation. You can't just it's not enough to say I'm not racist, I don't hate Black people, or I don't hate Asian people, but like, what do you actually know about them? I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where the opportunity is, especially now with access to technology and all the information that's out there. Like, you don't even have to go anywhere to improve your knowledge base. Take the baby steps of like, just look something up on the web that is different, and that runs maybe contrary to what you typically spend your time doing.
Mm-hmm.
Start there. I mean, if
And
it's
give
really,
yourself credit for that. I know there's this
yeah,
whole like white people, you don't get a cookie for finally showing up. I'm cool if you need to give yourself some cookies, where it's like the stuff I'm reading now is drastically different than the stuff I was reading a month ago.
yeah, and that's
And
the other thing. Like,
yeah.
I know what I was going to say. You know, it's okay to feel a certain way. It's okay to maybe feel some shame or whatever during this process, but don't let that keep you where you are,
Mm-hmm.
because that doesn't move the needle.
Right.
It's like an alcoholic being ashamed of being an alcoholic but continuing to drink. Right? Like, take the next step. You know, feel the shame, but don't let it be like the only thing that you feel.
Right. And shame won't kill you. Like
Mhm.
shame, once you allow shame to like feel it all the way through is what we tell our kids. Feel it till you get to the bottom. May take a while, but this
Mhm.
is where you get to receive support, which is why coaching matters, which is why having interpersonal relationships with people like us, you can process your shame. Shame isn't the reason that you don't get to participate. Shame is the reason you should.
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, babe.
Thank you.
Yeah. So stay tuned, friends. Mike and I are working on a workshop series, and it really is going to be all about values. And we've had some leaders in our community reach out and ask for information about it. We're putting things together, but our intention is to offer a way for you to have a touchstone. And that touchstone is your values, so that you can start to make decisions on multiple areas of your life, including racial justice and social justice and human rights, how you can actually act from a place of being in alignment. So stay tuned for
Mhm.
that. We're going to continue to do these lives for a while and see where they go. And as we find other ways to serve and support you and this community, stay tuned. We'll be sharing those. So thank you for joining today. We really do appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Okay.
Hold on, sweetie. Okay.
All right.
All right. We'll see you guys very soon. We'll answer all of your comments. So please keep dropping them. And if you catch this on the replay, let us know that too, so that we can be sure to say hi. So have a good day, you guys.